Chapter 5. We resumed our walk through the crowded, chaotic quadrangle. In another minute, our paths would diverge. I would go my way, and Scott would go his. You need to get laid, Scott said, apropos of nothing. What? I objected. What, indeed? One moment we had been talking about Officer Benson, Malcolm Darby, South Africa, and socio-economic privilege. Now Scott had switched to a completely different topic. This was another one of Scott's favorite tactics. You heard me. You're tense, Paul. I can tell. You need to get laid, and then you won't be so tense. I've gotten laid, I said indignantly. This was technically true. The spring of my junior year in high school, I had finally hooked up with my first serious girlfriend, Nancy Ross. That had led to the long-awaited rite of passage, and it had happened repeatedly for the better part of 2 years. Hallelujah, I remember thinking at the time. Nancy and I remained an item through the end of senior year. We stayed together over the summer of 1986, our post-graduation summer. There were a few bumps in the road, sure, but for the most part, I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. I was even starting to think that Nancy might be the one. I knew that was naive thinking on my part, given our extreme youth. But was it really necessary for me to go through half a dozen relationships and breakups before I found the one? What would be the point of that? Why not settle early? I should have seen trouble coming when Nancy announced that she would be going away to college, and not merely to Ohio State or another university within a few hours' drive. My Geography 101 professor was fond of observing that geography is destiny, but that wasn't true only with ancient Greeks and Persians in the Peloponnesian War. It was also true of young adult relationships. Nancy had won a partial scholarship to Florida State University, located in Tallahassee. Cincinnati and Tallahassee are separated by 740 miles, 11 hours on the road. In the mid-1980s, that distance was even greater than it might seem now. This was an era without FaceTime, texting, and unlimited long-distance minutes. We could write letters, and we could talk on the phone briefly once or twice each week. That was about it. Nancy returned to Cincinnati a few times during the year. I went down there on spring break, but it wasn't the same. What they say about long-distance relationships is true. They don't last, at least not when you're still in your teens, and especially not without the internet and 21st century smartphones. Nancy and I stayed together through one academic year of college and most of the following summer. Then, at the end of this past summer, the weekend before she was set to return to Tallahassee, she came to me with a surprise announcement. "There's this guy in Florida," she began. "You should probably know about him." I went through various stages of 19-year-old emotional excess: anger, grief, denial. Nancy was torn too, and torn between me and this other guy. "Have the two of you?" I finally asked. "Yes," she said gravely. That put an end to it for me. I told Nancy that if she was torn between the two of us, I would make the choice easy for her. I was officially breaking up with her. The guy in Tallahassee could have her. I told Scott about it, and he had not approved of the way I'd handled the situation. "Sure, I get why you were upset," Scott said, "but what were you expecting?" I had expected that Nancy would remain completely faithful to me while we were apart, as I had remained faithful to her. I told Scott this, and he laughed, though not unkindly. "I think what Nancy was saying was she wanted you to be her Cincinnati boyfriend, and this other guy could be her Florida boyfriend." When I started to object, he cut me off. "I know that isn't what you wanted, but you've got to look at the upside. Nancy was giving you permission to do the same thing while the two of you were apart. Maybe the two of you would have gotten back together later on, the way you were, and maybe you wouldn't have. Either way, you could have had your cake and eaten it too. I told Scott that this was not what I had wanted. I wanted a girlfriend who was 100% mine or no girlfriend at all. You need to be more adaptable, Paul, buddy. You need to understand the way the world works. And how is that? I'd asked him. Why don't you tell me? How it works is that a pretty girl on a college campus gets hit on a dozen times per day. And Nancy is prettier than most. What she ever saw in you, I can't imagine. Scott had said this last in a joking manner, the kind of joking that is only possible between two people who have been friends for as long as either can remember. And now, 4 months later, I was starting to wonder if Scott had had a point. I had stuck to my guns all right, but I was flailing about romantically. Nancy and I had gotten together so easily in high school. I had known Nancy for almost as long as I'd known Scott. I found it far more difficult to talk to girls in the commuter university environment, where the names and faces changed every semester, where a student body of 50,000 created the anonymous feel of a big city. High school had been much easier in retrospect. I didn't ask you if you'd ever gotten laid, Scott said now. I said, you need to get laid. Getting laid isn't like seeing Paris or reading one of the world's great novels. It's not like you do it and then you're like, oh, well, that's behind me now, I've done it. It's more like eating and sleeping. You have to approach getting laid as a maintenance activity. A group of co-eds passed by us. At least two of them were pretty and might reasonably have been within my league. But how was I supposed to make first meetings and introductions in fleeting circumstances such as these? I'll tell you what I think, Scott said. I think you're still moping over Nancy Ross. No, I objected. I am not still moping over Nancy Ross. Scott paused and gave me a curious look. What are you doing then exactly? I'm biding my time for now. What does that mean exactly? I haven't found the right girl here yet. Yes, there are only about 25,000 of them here at UC. All I'm saying is I'm still working on it. And anyway, weren't we talking about Officer Benson? It seems to me that Officer Benson is a pretty stand-up guy, even if he was throwing his weight around a little. This last was a fact that I could not deny. You're naive, Scott scoffed. There's more to Officer Benson than meets the eye. What are you talking about? I'll tell you another time. It's a long story. Hey, what's that new movie over there? I recognized that Scott just wanted to change the subject, no doubt for self-interested reasons that I could only guess at. But I had minced enough logic for today, and I didn't want to talk about Nancy Ross or my failure to rebound from her. Scott was referring to a cinematic release poster mounted to a small advertising marquee that had been placed near the edge of the quadrangle in a patch of winter brown lawn. There had been a time back in the 1970s, I guess, when the University of Cincinnati had been relatively free of gratuitous sales pitches from corporate entities. Those days were long past. This was 1987, and not even college kids were exempt from advertising, especially from the movie industry. The movie poster featured Cher, one leg lifted, arms raised in apparent jubilation. Behind the actress was a full moon and a city skyline. Cher was wearing a short black dress that accentuated her long, well-toned legs. Cher was old enough to be my mother, but I still found the image enticing, downright arousing, in fact. Maybe Scott was right about me needing to find another girlfriend. Moonstruck in theaters December 18th, 1987, the announcement just below the artwork read. Just throw caution to the wind, take chances, and you'll have another girlfriend before you know it, Scott said. All you need to do is... Then suddenly, Scott was the one who was tense. Hello, I'm Ed Trumnell, and thank you for listening to Chapter 5 of No Sure Thing. Remember, you can get the book on Amazon in the complete form in Kindle or paperback. But if you want to just keep listening to the chapters here on YouTube, there is a playlist on my channel. And I've done my best to kind of link the different chapters together so that you can follow along. If you're enjoying the story, I would encourage you to like and subscribe, and I will be back with another installment soon. And be sure to check my channel for other projects that are in progress and upcoming. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again soon.